I love when we're halfway through the month of July and I'm still on a 10 years later video that I should have been doing in June. Again, I explained in my Vince Staples review that I just posted why my pace of videos has been a bit slower, so I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm trying to find ways to get these videos up a little bit quicker, but I'm just not sure how I could do that without sacrificing the actual quality or depth of them. We'll see how it goes, but either way, welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And don't worry, we're not gonna have another weird-ass video like that LMFAO one that I did last time, because now we're back to the good stuff. As you can tell from the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2011 Beyoncé record 4. As the title suggests, this was the 4th studio album from Queen Bee herself, Beyoncé. Prior to this record's release, her 2008 2-disc album I Am Sasha Fierce was released to pretty mixed reviews, but it was home to a lot of her most iconic and beloved singles to date. Tracks like If I Were a Boy, Sweet Dreams, Halo, and of course the #1 Billboard Hot 100 track Single Ladies Put a Ring on It. She took a hiatus from music in 2010 and would also separate from her manager slash father Matthew Knowles just before the release of this album. Perhaps no longer being managed by her father led to a transformation in her sound and her artistry as a whole, and also her chart success to some degree. In the past, Beyoncé could make a top 10 hit on the Billboard charts with her eyes closed, but while this album hit #1 on the Billboard 200, it was her first studio album that didn't have a proper top 10 single on the Billboard Hot 100. That's not to say it didn't have some hits, because tracks like Best Thing I Never Had and Love on Top did peak around the top 20, but they weren't able to hit in the top 10. Honestly though, I think most people would probably tell you that's for the better. From this album forward, Beyoncé's records would receive greater critical acclaim than ever, and she would go on to move in directions that were far more experimental and conceptual than before. With this record in particular, Beyoncé wanted to craft something that was a bit more personal and intimate, with a deeper amount of maturity than before. This was the beginning of Beyoncé's artistic transformation, and even if it wasn't as commercial as some of her past records, it was considered her most high-quality release up to that point. And I honestly couldn't agree more. On this record, which stretches 14 tracks in just under an hour if you listen to the expanded edition like I did, Beyoncé does bring with her several tracks that feel very immediate and pop-friendly, but she takes a lot of time to get personal and deal with even deeper themes than before. You can see from the jump the increase in artistic freedom here, and the album is loaded with wonderful tracks from top to bottom. There are definitely some big singles on this that I heard plenty of back in the day. Love on Top was the one song from this album that I listened to quite a bit. I'd honestly argue that while Beyoncé has put out great music for a very long time, this was the first Beyoncé song that I properly fell in love with. It's a throwbacky R&B jam anchored by glossy keys, beautiful vocals from Beyoncé, and one of her most intoxicating choruses. It's one of those songs that just puts me in such a good mood when I listen to it. It's just lovely. Countdown is another track I instantly recognized when re-listening to this thing. While I didn't really listen to it much in the past, I heard it in pieces and was glad I got to hear it in full now. It's a track that almost feels like it mixes the R&B sounds with a bit of hip-hop flavor, and it absolutely bangs. Beyoncé's vocals are some of the best on the entire album, and I can see how this became such a huge song. Run the World Girls was another single I heard a lot of when I was younger, but it was one that took me a while to appreciate. It's amazing to listen back to because it's one of those songs where Beyoncé took a repetitive structure but managed to make it work in a way that was very catchy. The click-clacking marching band-esque beat combined with the great lyrics centered around female empowerment are also excellent too. And while the album is certainly more personal than some of Beyoncé's others, that doesn't mean there aren't some bigger jams. Party is another mid-tempo R&B jam with a lot of infectious energy to it. It's smooth, it's fun, Beyoncé sounds beautiful as you would expect, and I also love the featured verse from the legend himself, Andre 3000. It's another song that feels like a very funky throwback, and it succeeds hard on that. School and Life also stays in that upbeat sound, almost feeling like a party of its own. The song basically centers around doing well in life no matter what your age is, and it's one of the many tracks on here that feels like a very encouraging anthem. With its emphatic drums and bustling beat, it also has way too much energy to ignore. End of Time is also a banger. I love the energetic drum hits on the instrumental and how the song just never loses its bouncy feel. It's easily danceable, it has some great electronic influence at points of the instrumental, and of course Beyoncé's hook crafting remains fantastic. Again though, most of this album is pretty light and almost ballad-centric, which is certainly a good direction for Beyoncé. I Miss You actually takes things a lot lighter, having a click-clacky beat up against very ethereal synths with some writing from the man himself, Frank Ocean. It's very emotional and beautiful, with Beyoncé's vocals feeling very sultry over this more delicate production. Dance For You is another light R&B jam with writing contributions from The Dream, and initially I was kind of worried about this one, seeing as how it's 6 minutes long. Without much of a beat switch, I kind of worried it was going to get stale, but it doesn't. Beyoncé's natural ability to craft a very catchy hook shines through once again, and honestly I could feel The Dream's influence here. With the somewhat atmospheric synth feel of the song, I can kind of see the Dreams singing over this one. I Care is probably one of the darkest songs on the record. While it maintains the ethereal R&B vibes of some of the other tracks here, the writing centers around a relationship going sour, with Beyoncé outlining how much she cares about a partner that doesn't reciprocate the feelings. What really lifts the track is Beyoncé's very broken vocals. There are several points where it sounds like she's on the verge of tears, and that level of emotion makes it really compelling from start to finish. Rather Die Young is another love song that kind of goes in a lot of different sonic directions. It starts off very mellow, almost on the verge of being a cappella, but then it kind of explodes into another old school funk and soul fusion. Beyoncé dominates over this kind of production, and her Ode to Love makes this a gem. 1+1 maintains that emotion, being an R&B power ballad built largely on some lighter guitar plucks. It's another ode to her lover, Jay-Z, where that mellow instrumental is juxtaposed by explosive vocal passages. Beyoncé is in her typical zone vocally, and she really sells the emotion and feeling of love on it. Best Thing I Never Had is a ballad that has a bit of a bigger instrumental, and it's another good highlight of storytelling. Beyoncé sings about a former lover that she wants to avoid feeling heartbroken over because she feels he blew his chance to be with her. It's oozing with emotion thanks in no small part to Beyoncé's emotion cracking through her vocals. I had heard bits of this song in the past, and I'm glad I got to listen to the full thing because it's a big gem in Beyoncé's catalog. Start Over feels a bit breezier, with Beyoncé going into a relationship that she wants to give another chance to. It once again wears its emotion on its sleeve, but Beyoncé sounds great over these somewhat brighter instrumental that mixes lighter, more atmospheric moments into it. I Was Here is probably the most heart-clenching song on the album. Over a very light piano instrumental, Beyoncé sings about wanting to be remembered long after she leaves this world. I can say she surely will be, but I think beyond the typical elements that make Beyoncé's songs great, like the lovely mellow instrumental and her powerful vocal passages, I think this serves as an excellent point to close the expanded edition out on. Personally, I tend to think a lot about what impact I would leave behind, and I think it's an idea that's kind of universal. Beyoncé captures that a good deal in her writing, this idea of feeling like you made an impact and like you'll be remembered once you're gone. I think she couldn't have picked a better note to end on. Overall, Beyoncé's fourth album remains one of her finest. Even when it has moments that maintain that poppy feel of her old works, it manages to keep them interesting and elevate them with its implementations of old school R&B, soul, and funk, which makes it very compelling. Beyoncé herself has always been a great vocalist, and that doesn't change here, but what's nice to see is how she isn't afraid to be a bit more personal on the record. A lot of these tracks feel like they deal with and describe several of Beyoncé's own experiences, and it's honestly pretty great. The actual music itself is as lovely as you would expect, and it's great to see Beyoncé's own growth throughout several points on the album. Obviously, Beyoncé would further her experimentation a lot beyond this record, but as a first step, this was a very lovely album, and a great first push into a brand new direction for her. The biggest songs still hit, and the album as a whole has aged like a very fine wine. Back in 2011, I didn't have anywhere near the same appreciation for Beyoncé as I do now, so even with some decent singles, I don't know if I would have enjoyed this record. Listening to it now, yeah, I do. If I had to put it on my scale, it would definitely get an excellent from me. As the beginning of Beyoncé's big transition in her career, this was a pretty beautiful listen. But that's just my opinion on the record. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back in 2011? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it back then, hate it back then? Do you still love it now? Do you still hate it now? Are you just completely indifferent towards it? And where do you rank it in Beyoncé's discography? Whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And now I'm going to try to finally get through the July 10 Years Later videos that I have to do. Hopefully time will permit that. But moving right along, the next album that I'm going to be talking about in 10 Years Later is Kendrick Lamar's Section 80. I know that record is gigantic, and I can't wait to listen to it and talk about it myself. So stay tuned for that, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.